And we have a good record. In fact, in the power sector, just in the last 15 years, we've been able to reduce emissions by 40%. And most of that is because of a fuel switch that has gone on from coal to natural gas. We want to be able to continue to export that environmental progress throughout the world.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Amara Walker, and today for Frederica Whitfield. The price of gas in the U.S. is hitting levels never seen before. AAA saying the national average is now $5 a gallon, a new all-time high. Prices climbing at a dramatic pace, 60 cents in the last month alone. More than 20 states are now over that average. California's the highest at $6.43. CNN's Paul Verkammen is at a gas station in L.A. Paul, how are people there reacting to these very high gas prices in California?
Well, they're reacting with shock, and they are in agony. If you look behind me, this gas station is considered a discount at $6.09 a gallon. As you articulated, here in California, the average now $6.42. What drives all of this? California has an extremely high gas tax at 51 cents per gallon. These taxes used to improve roads and infrastructure and whatnot. But for these vendors that we're talking to today, they're absolutely getting jackhammered by these prices. A family rental business, party rental business, busy time of the year, weddings, graduations, Father's Day around the corner. What they're doing right now is they're only filling up a partial tank at a time. Let's listen.
Yeah, it's crazy. It literally went up $1, I think, within a week. Went from $5.39 to $6.09 now. I think what it is. And we only filled it with quarter tank, and it's probably going to last us maybe for the rest of the day. If not, we're going to have to fill up later on today again, another 60.
So if you do the math, it's about $240 to fill up that large van so they can make their deliveries. And they say they have to pass this on to the consumers. And of course, the consumers now debating about whether or not they can afford the party rentals. It's all one huge, colossal ripple effect here, Amara, as Southern Californians are hurting with these high gas prices.
It definitely is a colossal ripple effect. Paul Verkammen, thank you. And a short time ago, President Biden left California heading to New Mexico. He spoke to reporters just moments ago about plans to help ease gas prices and also about gun safety. CNN's Arlette Saenz is traveling with the president, joining us now live. Hi there, Arlette. What did he say?
Well, Amara, President Biden once again lamented the high gas prices that Americans are feeling, saying that it is in part due to Russia's war in Ukraine. The president spoke to reporters about the administration's efforts to try to drive down some of those prices and release more oil that could be purchased. Take a listen.
It's outrageous what the war in Ukraine is causing, and we're trying very hard to make sure that we've significantly increased the number of barrels of oil that are being pumped out of the reserve we have. We've got 240,000 barrels as well coming from other nations. We're going to keep pushing on it. It's going to keep pushing.
Of course, those high gas prices are part of what was driving up that record inflation report yesterday, which was really dismal compared to what the Biden administration had hoped to see, as they were hoping the prices would soon begin to moderate. Now, the president was also asked about the prospect of him possibly traveling to Saudi Arabia potentially next month. That is what advisors have said, that a trip likely, or a meeting at least, between President and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman likely would happen next month. But the president himself told reporters that he hasn't decided if he actually will travel to Saudi Arabia, and has said that if he does travel, it would be to discuss larger national security issues, not energy, even as some advisors have said that part of a possible reset between the U.S. and Saudi relations would be to address those energy issues, as the U.S. is hoping there will be increased production to try to provide some more stable prices when it comes to gas, both domestically and abroad. Now, additionally, the president was also asked about those margin March for Our Lives, marches that are going on across the country. He urged people to continue to demonstrate and show lawmakers that they want to see action, especially with those November midterm elections coming up. Amra.
All right, very interesting comments there. Arlette Saenz, thank you very much. And as Arlette mentioned, mass demonstrations are happening nationwide, calling for tighter gun control laws. More than 300 March for Our Lives rallies are happening today. Rally goers are renewing their cries for lawmakers to address the gun violence epidemic after a series of horrific mass shootings. CNN is covering the rallies across multiple cities, and I want to begin with Whitney Wild at the Capitol. Whitney, what's going on there?
Well, we are just between the Washington Monument and the White House, steps from the Capitol. And what's going on now is speakers are continuing to explain why this is so important, as if it needs any more explanation. But what they say is that clearly, because there has not been enough action, there need to be more stories, more clarity that this is such a real issue that affects all different types of the American experience. It happens in neighborhoods every day. It happens at supermarkets. It happens at churches. It happens at schools. And the point here is to expose that gun violence does not discriminate. It affects the entirety of the American experience, and the people here are demanding change. We heard from speakers who've lost loved ones to gun violence, like Garnell Whitfield, whose mother was murdered at the Buffalo mass shooting at the Tops supermarket earlier this month. And what he said was he called on lawmakers and called on really all Americans to remember that our most precious commodity is people. We also heard from David Hogg. He's a survivor of the Parkland shooting in 2018 on Valentine's Day, when a shooter killed more than a dozen students at his high school. And here's what he had to say earlier today.
Here's the reality. If our government can't do anything to stop 19 kids from being killed and slaughtered in their own school and decapitated, it's time to change who is in government. As we gather here today, the next shooter is already plotting his attack, while the federal government pretends it can do nothing to stop it. Since the shooting in Texas, the Senate has done only one thing. They have gone on recess.
There was a moment here when the clock on the monitor behind me hit 78 minutes, and it was a count of how long it took for the shooting in Uvalde, for police to finally enter the shooting in Uvalde. And so what's very clear here is that people are calling on elected officials, on law enforcement, on anybody who has any role in changing this gun violence epidemic to do more. And again, this march happened 4 years ago here in Washington. In that time, how many mass shootings have there been? How many lives have been lost? And so the question posed to elected leaders and to law enforcement, to members of the justice system, is how many more people have to die before more action is taken? Back to you.
And since then, how many gun control reform bills have been passed in Congress? None. Thank you so much, Whitney Wild. CNN's Paula Sandoval joining us now live from New York. Tell us about your vantage point there.
You know, Amber, it was only 4 weeks ago today that New Yorkers experienced firsthand the pain that comes with these mass shootings. Of course, talking about that shooting that took place in Buffalo, New York. And here we are 4 weeks later, and New Yorkers have really been sort of re-galvanized by the events of that tragic day to speak up. And that's what we saw today, as we saw a massive group of demonstrators come together in Brooklyn and then march over the iconic Brooklyn Bridge, and then a few moments ago arrived here in Lower Manhattan Financial District for the speakers portion of the program. So we're hearing from survivors of mass shootings, from elected officials as well, and their message seems to be the same, that more needs to be done beyond what may have already been done at the local or state level, but instead at the federal level, and calling on lawmakers to act, especially in the Senate. And what perhaps stands apart here is what we saw from state lawmakers just a few days ago, as they introduced and enacted a lengthy list of legislation that was passed and signed by Governor Hochul, and among those provisions, even increasing the age that's required to purchase certain weapons. And that is what I'm hearing from people here in New York. They would like to see similar legislation not only introduced and passed at the House level, but at the Senate level, nationally, but they're also very familiar with the reality that that may not happen. So that's why they're coming together and making sure that their call not only extends beyond New York throughout the country, but makes it to Washington, D.C. as well. Amber?
Exactly. Thank you so much, Polo. Let's turn it over now to CNN's Brian Todd, also joining us live from D.C. Brian, tell us more about what the attendees are telling you and the sentiment, what they're feeling.
Well, Amara, a lot of them are feeling very frustrated and kind of trying to bring out their activism here toward ending gun violence and discussing solutions. I do have to update you a little bit on a bit of a security scare we had here just a few minutes ago. Someone in the crowd did something to spark some fear in the crowd, and many members of the crowd kind of started rushing toward us this way in a panic. It was kind of a mini stampede for a few minutes because a few people got knocked down. Then someone who was speaking on the riser, one of the designated speakers, got on the loudspeaker and said, "Do not run, there is no emergency." And then things kind of calmed down. But the Park Police just issued a statement saying that someone in the crowd interfered with a permitted event and that person has been detained and an investigation is ongoing. That's really all we can tell you at the moment, but there was that kind of a scare here a short time ago, kind of illustrating the tension around this event. Right now, I'm joined by Raymond Whitfield. His mother, Ruth Whitfield, was killed in the Buffalo grocery store shooting. He's here with his niece, Simone Crawley. Raymond, your brother, Garnell, a short time ago, addressed the crowd and said that until this happened to your family, that your family was kind of on the sidelines of the debate. Going through what you've gone through, now coming here and speaking, what do you want people to know, people who have not been directly affected by gun violence? Based on your experience, what do you want those people on the sidelines to know about this debate?
Well, let me say this, that my mother was an avid watcher of cable news. So much so that the grandchildren would say, CNN again. But there were so many times that we sat there watching the victims of gun violence cry with them. And then when the segment was over, we could wipe away the tears and pull ourselves together and go on with our lives. But when you're standing here, these are the tears you can't wipe away. These tears will last a lifetime. And it's time that we recognize that this can happen. If it can happen in a grocery store at 2:30 in the afternoon to an 86-year-old woman who couldn't run if she wanted to, it can happen to you anywhere at any time. It is time for this country to recognize the scourge of America is white supremacy. It is time to support an anti-white supremacy hate crime bill.
And you and your brother, your entire family have been very eloquent in delivering that message, and we thank you for speaking to us today. We hope that you guys can get through the grieving process all right. It's impossible to really get through it, I know.
We haven't had a chance to grieve yet, but we thank you for the sentiment.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, Raymond. It's that kind of personal message, guys, that has been delivered over and over and over again. Congresswoman Cori Bush just gave an impassioned speech about how she had been threatened by gun violence by a partner of hers years ago. Again, people delivering these personal stories, bringing home the message that they want to get across here. It's time for Congress to do something about ending gun violence. But frankly, I've talked to a lot of people in the crowd today. There's not a lot of confidence that that can get done. Amara.
That's a good point, Brian. This is not someone else's story. This is our story, America's story. Thank you so much, Brian Todd, and to the others for their reports. All right, coming up, a busy week in the nation's capital as a January 6th committee will hold 3 more hearings. We'll tell you what's expected in the days to come.
Summer in Abu Dhabi. It's everything you want, but so much more than you'd expect. It's relaxing days at the pool in water as chilled as your drink. It's bonding with family, but upside down. And even more so, it's burning rubber on an F1 racetrack, roller coasters breaking records. It's seizing the day or owning the night. It's literally drinking 23 karat gold. It's uniquely designed to make it the summer of your dreams. Abu Dhabi has everything you need to summer like you mean it.
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
Being a Restovac robs these children of their soul. They never feel like they're valued. I remember one of the girls said to me, "It's as if I'm living, but I don't exist." My name is Joan Kahn, and I am the Executive Director for Restovac Freedom Foundation based in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Restovac Freedom Foundation works with children who are living as Restovac. It's a form of child slavery. Many of them work from sunup to sundown. They do most of the chores for the family. When CNN came to Haiti for the Freedom Project with Common Dreams, we found this child in an area that we work. Her name is Fedna, and she lived with her grandfather at the time. And we went to visit the grandfather and asked if he would allow her to go to school. And he agreed to do that. And so we actually took her and enrolled her in school for the first time. She was 9 years old. Now Fedna is 20, and so she's in the 10th grade. They get a really late start on life, but at least they are able to be part of society. And I think just seeing these children become visible to people is a powerful thing.
Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus. Fact versus fiction.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
You guys ready?
Alex Jones.
Those thought patterns, the three presenters, QAnon group, or the anti-vaxxers, they all originate from Alex.
How much damage can one man do to school shooting victims?
Alex Jones lied about Sandy Hook.
And the country.
The people who listen to him believe the things that he says.
CNN asks those who know him.
He's not like you or me.
The truth doesn't really matter at all.
CNN Special Report, Megaphone for Conspiracy. Alex Jones, Monday on CNN.
The January 6th committee will hold its next hearing on Monday. It is one of 3 planned for next week. The panel says they'll first focus on former President Trump's effort to spread false information about the 2020 election. This follows the committee's primetime hearing on Thursday that laid out in detail how the attack on the Capitol unfolded, with graphic video and never-before-heard testimony. They argue that the former president led a sophisticated 7-point plan to overturn the 2020 election, incite the Capitol riot, and subvert American democracy. Jennifer Rogers is a CNN legal analyst and a former federal prosecutor. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining me. First off, what did you think of Thursday's primetime opening statement from the panel?
I was really impressed, Amra. It really exceeded my expectations. I thought that they needed to present the new evidence that they were talking about and really set forward in a clear and concise way the multi-pronged attack on democracy in our country that Trump and his associates perpetrated. And they did that. Liz Cheney was methodical in the way that she set out the plot. They brought 2 new witnesses, and I thought the way that they used video, specifically when they overlaid the video of really gruesome violence at the Capitol with the president's words about how there was love in the air and it was peaceful, I thought was really, really compelling.
You know, sources told CNN, Jennifer, that Attorney General Merrick Garland and other Justice Department officials were watching the hearing to see what crimes, if any, the committee thinks it has uncovered. Did you see anything on Thursday, any evidence of a crime?
Well, we've been talking about this for months and months as evidence has trickled out about what's been captured by the committee. And I'm not surprised Garland and his folks are paying attention. It's clear the committee thinks that crimes were committed here and that they'll make a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, and then the Justice Department will have to decide what to do. I do see evidence of crimes. The question is, what does that evidence look like when you put it all together, and can they reach the burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt that they have to reach if they're going to take this to trial. So I do think, though, that there has been ample evidence of a conspiracy crime against the United States called a Klein conspiracy, and also a conspiracy that many of the insurrectionists from January 6th have already been charged with, a conspiracy to thwart Congress in doing its constitutional duties.
And, you know, we were talking about this in an editorial meeting this morning regarding the overall goal of the committee. And it seems like it's multifaceted, right? It's not just, you know, getting legal accountability for those involved or responsibility, but also for there to be political ramifications and for the public to actually care and understand the significance of what actually happened on January 6th.
I think you're right. You know, clearly they want legal accountability. Clearly they want some political ramifications here. But this is a historic moment in our nation. This has never, ever happened before, a president trying to subvert democracy in this way. So it's part of the historical record. And I think many members of the January 6th committee are very aware of that as they press forward. They want this to be in the record in one place, easy to digest, and they want the American public to know about it. That's certainly one of their major goals here.
So what are you looking forward to in the days ahead in terms of what we might hear or see, and the line that the committee is trying to draw between Trump and these groups like, you know, the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers?
So they are going to start making good on their promise to march through these 7 components of this multifaceted plot. And they're going to give us the evidence. You know, we've heard about testimony that happened behind closed doors, but we haven't seen most of it. So I expect they'll start to actually show us the evidence, you know, starting with the disinformation campaign, marching through to trying to subvert DOJ and get them on board with this plot. I'm really looking forward to hearing about the evidence on the fraudulent slates of electors that came from 7 states. You know, I really want to see all of it. And I think they've done a great job of telling us what's to come so that people will tune in. And I really want to see what they've collected. I think it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, a very important point in our history as well. Thank you so much, Jennifer Rogers. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Still ahead, will anyone's mind be changed about January 6th after watching the hearings? And what could be the political fallout? We'll discuss next.
For World Sport, I'm Don Riddell, and this is CNN.
All new African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Meet the photographers who are capturing stories on equality and social justice.
I felt that it was my responsibility to document our realities.
African Voices Changemakers, this weekend on CNN, in association with Glow.
Gas prices, baby formula shortages, and rising inflation. Former U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Ben Bernanke joins Fareed for a look at America's economy. Is the country heading towards a recession? What can turn things around? Fareed Zakaria, GPS, Sunday on CNN.
I'm Will Ripley in Taipei, Taiwan, and this is CNN.
The January 6th committee took its long-awaited case public this week. Evidence presented during the initial 2-hour hearing jolting viewers back to the violent day and making clear the committee holds former President Trump responsible.
President Trump invested millions of dollars of campaign funds purposely spreading false information, running ads he knew were false, and convincing millions of Americans that the election was corrupt and that he was the true president. As you will see, this misinformation campaign provoked the violence on January 6th.
Here now to discuss, CNN political analyst and professor of history and public affairs at Princeton is Julian Zelizer, and CNN senior political analyst and senior editor at The Atlantic, Ron Brownstein. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Julian, I'll start with you because earlier this week you wrote a piece on CNN.com that the hearings are unlikely to change most Republicans' minds about the events of January 6th. And I'm sure it doesn't help that you have the likes of Fox News who didn't even air the hearings live, but had their hosts talking over these live feeds. Do you still feel that way?
Yes, as powerful as the first day of hearings was, and I'm sure more is to come, it's still unlikely that the Republican electorate, which lived through many shocks to the political system during the Trump presidency, is going to change its position because of the findings. And as you're saying, added to that is the spin and kind of information you're getting from conservative media, which would only strengthen those positions. So in many ways, the Republican Party, I think, might just double down and continue with election denialism, even if the hearings continue to produce very dramatic and shocking information.
Yeah, look, we still don't know what the potential legal consequences or political consequences might be, since there are several more hearings that we will be seeing over the next couple of weeks. But Ron, Democrats are hoping that these hearings will boost turnout for them at the polls during this year's midterms. Do you think that it's possible, especially considering all that's going on with inflation and all these supply shortages that we're facing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm less fatalistic about this having no impact on the public. During Watergate, Richard Nixon's approval rating among Republicans went from 90% in Gallup to 50% on the day that he resigned. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And not only because of conservative media not covering it or, rebutting it, but also because Republican elected officials, even those who are dismayed by what has happened, are not standing up and saying this is wrong beyond Kinzinger and Cheney. And those kind of elite cues were very important in Watergate. And it's a real kind of circular logic where Republican elected officials are saying, well, we can't come out and say this is wrong because the base will turn on us. Well, one of the reasons why the base is so unmoving in their refusal to acknowledge what happens is because no officials they trust are giving them other cues. Look, could this change turn out at the margin in 2022? Sure. I mean, it is a reminder to I think it was over 90 million separate Americans came out to vote against Trump in either the 16, 18, or 20 elections. And this is a reminder of all of the threats those voters saw. But having said that, this is really more of an issue about 24 than 22. Midterm elections are a snapshot on the condition of the country at that moment. And as you point out, inflation and gas prices are overwhelming everything else. I think this will be more relevant when the question comes in 24 about whether the voters want Trump or someone who is aligned with him to again control the powers of the presidency.
Yeah, look, it seems like the takeaway message is this threat to democracy could and will happen again if significant changes are not, being made after this, Julian. Do you feel like the significance is being brought home, especially, and I think there were a few articles in The Atlantic, Ron, that I read, where there's concern about the dangers of using the shorthand January 6th, where people aren't fully aware of the details of the grave abuses that happened leading up and during on January 6th. Julian, this is for you. Sorry.
I think the way to think about it is will the hearings affect the short-term political environment or 2024? And the other is just the broader question. The responsibility of Congress is to create historical accountability to what happened. And in doing that, we understand more, not just January 6th on itself, but the entire orchestrated campaign to overturn the election, which then points to areas of vulnerability in our political system. And those are important if discussions of reforming that system continue, including the Electoral Count Act, which now has bipartisan interest in fixing. So I think what the committee is doing might be very relevant on that front and give us better sense of the fissures in an election system we often take for granted.
And I just want to ask that same question to you, Ron. I mean, do you think, I guess, through these hearings, the public will become more aware of the significance and the details of January 6th?
Well, as you were talking about in your previous segment, what's really important is the committee is reframing the basic question. I mean, the basic question we've mostly been discussing, in the last 18 months or so is what did Trump's words and actions, how much culpability did he have for the attack on the Capitol? The committee is reframing this completely and portraying the attack on the Capitol as just one component of a much larger attack on democracy. This multi-step, multi-month, multi-pronged effort to subvert an election from an American president. And I think to a great extent, the success or failure of the committee will be on the extent to which they cause Americans to recognize the full breadth of what happened. And not only are most Republican elected officials looking away from it, they are actively moving in the opposite direction. I mean, looking to operationalize Trump's lies about the elections with efforts in red states, both making it harder to vote and also increasing opportunities for partisan manipulation of the vote and election deniers running for position of control over election administration. So there is an ongoing challenge here. And I think that is what the committee is really trying to point the public toward.
Yeah, no doubt the stakes are extremely high for this country and our democracy. We'll leave it there. Julian Zelizer and Ron Brownstein, thank you so much. Ron, stick around because we have more questions for you about the increasing pressure to deal with rising crime in California and why it means a reckoning for some progressive candidates, what it means regarding that. We'll be right back.
The problem with plastic is that it's indestructible. Not-plat packaging can break down in a home compost extremely fast, just like an apple or just like an orange. A lot of people were surprised that seaweed could be turned into a packaging material. We chose seaweed because it has a lot of sustainable credentials. It doesn't use fresh water or fertilizer to grow. It just grows on its own in the sea without human intervention. And on top of that, when it grows, it sequesters carbon. We partnered for the London Marathon with Lucozade. They were using plastic bottles and cups, and they were really keen to reduce the amount of waste that is created at these events. At the end of the event, it was brilliant that the trucks that clean the streets and usually have to stop at each station to pick up all of that plastic, they just drove by our station. There was nothing to pick up, so it was really incredible, the feeling that we had delivered hydration without the plastic. Nature has all of the solutions. We just have to continue getting our inspiration from it. Different plants, different trees, different vegetables. This is what the future looks like. We need to use more of other natural materials, and I think through this diversity, we can really solve this problem. And I'm really hopeful that we will.
On Culinary Journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
We're here now at the home of one of the FSB team, and my name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
It's just been a chaotic scene here. People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
We were just in the hospital. It was shocking. Why do you think India has been hit so badly? Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
Why does a small group of women asking for their right to be educated threaten you so much?
Raise your hand if you love school.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
You can hear gunshots every couple minutes. Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their story.
Voters in two of the most liberal cities in America sent a clear message to the Democratic Party on Tuesday. They want their leaders to refocus on the most basic functions of government by ensuring their safety, protecting their quality of life, and restoring order. Ron Brownstein is back with us. And Ron, the race to be the next mayor of Los Angeles is headed for a runoff. Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass and billionaire real estate developer Rick Caruso were the top two vote getters in the recent primary election. This is a sitting congresswoman against a political unknown. Why was this race so close?
Well, partially it was close because Rick Caruso spent $40 million to introduce himself to voters of LA. But even with that money, many people here, many political analysts I've spoke to said, a few years ago, it would have been inconceivable that someone with his profile, a former Republican, white developer, former member of the police commission, supported by the police unions, would have taken off. And I think you saw in the LA mayoral race the same thing you saw in the San Francisco DA recall, which is that voters, as you said, want more focus on the basic functions of restoring order and safety. That doesn't mean they've abandoned interest in criminal justice reform or that they have lost concern about racial equity in the criminal justice system. But I think they are sending a clear message that those goals have to be kept in tandem with providing safety. I think what happened to the DA in San Francisco in particular, Chesa Boudin, was that he seemed to prioritize the interests of the very small minority majority of people who are ever accused of crimes over the broader public's principal concern with the criminal justice system, which is that to keep them safe. So I think there's a clear message of rebalancing and recalibrating here for Democrats.
Yeah, will you set the scene for us, though? Because, I being from Southern California, I know what these conversations sounded like, and and talking to my friends in San Francisco about the rampant homelessness and the encampments that they're seeing, also in Los Angeles, and the crime being up, and a lot of the petty crime as well, including violent crime, which is also a major issue. But set the scene in terms of, what Los Angelinos and people in San Francisco, what they have been dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Yeah, this was as much about order as it was about safety. I mean, the crime statistics in San Francisco, as you know, are actually kind of mixed. Some areas going up, like car break-ins, others not. LA, more consistent rise in crime. But in both cities, I think in many ways, the concern about safety is driven as much by homelessness as, crime per se, fear of being mugged. I think what's happened in both cities is that there's a widespread sense among voters that the government and public officials have effectively given up on trying to protect public spaces for the public. And in both cities, particularly LA, there are large encampments, homeless encampments, that essentially are colonizing public spaces and creating an atmosphere where it is hard for people to get through their day without encountering someone who seems a threat to themselves or to others. For example, in Venice, Los Angeles, near where I live, the public library, the quintessential public service, the city has allowed it to be engulfed by a homeless encampment to a point where longtime residents and people with kids feel like they can't use the public service. That's an imbalance that is not sustainable politically. And I think you saw a very clear message from voters on Tuesday that they want a different balance in how the cities deal with these issues.
Yeah, and I read a piece that you wrote on CNN.com ahead of the California primary, warning that an earthquake was building in California elections that would rattle the entire political landscape in America. Is that what's happened?
Yeah, look, I think, it's already been developing. Obviously, Eric Adams won in New York, the mayoral race on similar themes. We have, Minneapolis, the voters there rejecting the ballot referendum to defund the police. In large Democratic cities, people want a balance. I think it is a mistake to look at this as they are abandoning interest in criminal justice reform. The state attorney general, Rob Bonta, who's been a principal supporter of bail reform, kind of cruised through the primary this week. But what they are saying is that cannot be the sole goal. And you cannot take that goal to an extreme that seems to jeopardize other important, aspects of this, particularly public safety. I mean, we're not done yet. It's not clear that Rick Caruso is going to win in the end. It's going to be tough for him to get to 50%. It's going to be a competitive race all the way through. But there could be a recall against the equally liberal district attorney in Los Angeles County, George Gascon. He used to have the job in San Francisco. They have until July 6th to get the signatures to put him on the ballot in November. And if they do, he's going to have a tough time. Polling shows his approval rating is underwater. Again, doesn't mean the voters are, we've gone back and erased the summer of 2020. It's not like it never happened, but I think there's a very clear message of a recalibration that voters are asking for that puts a higher priority on safety and does not seem to take reform to absolutist steps that lead to illogical results, like people being picked up with guns repeatedly and being let out repeatedly and no consequences until they do something really dire.
Yeah, balance being the key word here, right? And obviously the Democrats in Congress and the White House are watching very closely and getting this message as well. All right, Ron Brownstein, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
And don't forget, there is a new episode of CNN's original series tomorrow night. What made John Dean decide to testify against Nixon? The Watergate scandal heats up when the CNN original series Watergate Blueprint for a Scandal continues tomorrow night at 9 on CNN. Back after this.
Air Quality Update in association with Copernicus, Europe's Eyes on Earth. Air Quality Update in association with Copernicus, Europe's Eyes on Earth.
With Bitcoin, not only do we have the best monetary asset in human history, we have the best monetary network in human history. Bitcoin solved a lot of the monetary functions that we know as very expensive with cryptography and with math. And so I can escrow a bearer instrument in Bitcoin. It's worth the same amount in Chicago as it is in London, as it is in Nigeria, as it is in Argentina, and I can zip it around the world instantly and for free. What we can do is take your dollars and escrow them around the world over the Bitcoin network. So think about this. What if I wanted to send money from Chicago to London? What we can do is take dollars out of your bank account, turn it into Bitcoin, zip that value to London instantly and for free. You blink, you'd miss it. It goes so fast and it costs nothing. And then we turn it back into British pounds. That's innovation, and that's how we use Bitcoin, the monetary network.
June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
We share this place, we all belong.
I'm Paula Newton in Ottawa, and this is CNN.
The James Webb Telescope had a bit of a space fender bender. One of the 18 golden segments of the telescope's giant mirror was hit by a micrometeoroid, which is smaller than a grain of sand, according to an update from NASA. Sorry, I can't say that. But don't worry, the Space Observatory is still on track to share its first high-resolution, full-color images on July 12th. And if you look up to the skies and think you're enjoying a starry night, you might be looking at something else entirely. Thousands of small satellites are currently orbiting the Earth and threatening to forever change our view of the night sky. CNN's Kristen Fisher has more.
Here in this remote stretch of Saskatchewan,
wow, that's a lot of stars.
A chance to see the brilliance of the night sky.
That's so cool.
But astronomer Samantha Lawler says it's changing and fast as more and more satellites get in the way.
For the first time in human history, we're not going to have access to the night sky the way that we've seen it since as long as we've been human.
It only takes a few minutes of looking up with the naked eye to see what she's talking about.
There's one. I see a satellite right up there.
Yep. There's another one. I see a second satellite right there. See, there's one, there's two.
Yep. Wow, that one's really bright.
Where?
And really low. What?
Oh, yeah.
What?
An assistant professor of astronomy at the University of Regina, Lawler's been watching from her farm as the number of active satellites has exploded from about 1,000 in 2017 to more than 5,000 today.
This is a lot worse than I expected. It's changing fast.
And it's about to get much worse. Lawler and her colleagues created this simulation based on their recently published predictions about satellite pollution.
This is the number of satellites that are in orbit right now that we're seeing in the sky. And this is adding in the tens of thousands more that are planned without any regulation.
That's crazy.
And
it covers the whole Earth.
Yeah.
In less than a decade, Lawler predicts that 1 out of every 15 stars in the sky will actually be a moving satellite. It's the dawn of what's called the mega constellations. Tens of thousands of small satellites, only about 300 miles above Earth, launched by private companies.
3, 2, 1.
To provide global, high-speed internet access.
Liftoff, Starlink 47.
Elon Musk's SpaceX is responsible for 1/3 of all active satellites.
Carrying separation confirmed.
More than any other company or country, including the U.S. government.
And off they go.
SpaceX has already launched more than 2,000 satellites, with plans to launch at least 42,000 more for its mega constellation called Starlink. SpaceX has said, "We firmly believe in the importance of a natural night sky for all of us to enjoy, which is why we have been working with leading astronomers around the world." And the company has made changes by adding a deployable visor to the satellite to block sunlight from hitting the brightest parts of the spacecraft. But astronomers like Lawler say it's not enough. As of now, there are no binding international rules monitoring these mega constellations.
We're already seeing so many now, today, and there's going to be 10 times as many.
There's one. There's another satellite.
Kristen Fisher, CNN, Saskatchewan.
Egypt is developing a sustainable and inclusive transportation network to improve mobility across the country. By ensuring affordability and accessibility to public transport systems and reducing carbon emissions. It is responsibly connecting communities like never before.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers. Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
Have you heard it like this?
Let's untangle the players and political forces.
Fast-paced news from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Weeknights on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
All right, you guys ready?
Alex Jones.
Those thought patterns, the 3 percenters, QAnon group, or the anti-vaxxers, they all originate from Alex.
How much damage can one man do to